Beneath the sun-drenched waves of the ancient Mediterranean lived 50 sisters of immense power and grace. These were the Nereids, a shimmering court of sea nymphs who commanded the coastal waters and guided the fate of sailors. By the end of our journey, you will know the names, stories, and hidden secrets of all 50 of these captivating deities. We will uncover why one of them was destined to bear a son greater than his father, and how their collective power could calm the fiercest ocean storms. Which mythical sea creature has always captured your imagination the most? Their father was Nereus, a primordial sea god known to sailors as the Old Man of the Sea. His very name meant liquid, the essence of the ocean itself. He was a prophetic being capable of shifting his shape, but renowned for his truthful and benevolent nature. Their mother was Doris, a beautiful oceanid, a nymph of the vast fresh water that encircled the world. From this powerful union sprang 50 daughters, each a perfect embodiment of the sea's many moods and blessings. These were the Nereids, and they lived not in the dark, crushing depths, but in a shimmering silver cave at the bottom of the Mediterranean, their home filled with the treasures lost to the waves. They served as the radiant attendants to the great god Poseidon and his queen, Amphitrite, who was herself the most powerful of the Nereid sisters. Think of them not as distant, indifferent spirits, but as active, caring forces. For the fishermen casting their nets at dawn, their presence was a hope for a bountiful catch. For the sailor navigating by the stars, a glimpse of their playful forms in the foamy crest of a wave was a promise of safe passage. They were the protectors of all who lived and worked upon their father's domain, a chorus of 50 voices that could whisper the sea into a calm, glassy stillness or sing it into a raging fury. They held the power of the sea's fertile, life-giving energy, and their favor was a treasure more valuable than any cargo. Their legacy began with a union of 2 distinct realms of water. Nereus was a titan, a god of the ancient world older than the mighty Olympians. He was the Old Man of the Sea, a title that spoke not of frailty but of immense primordial wisdom. His knowledge of the ocean's every secret was absolute, and he possessed the gift of prophecy, always speaking the unvarnished truth. He could change his form at will, becoming a wave, a whirlpool, or a fearsome sea monster, yet his heart was consistently gentle and just. He was the liquid soul of the Mediterranean itself. His wife, Doris, was an oceanid, one of the 3,000 daughters of the Titans Oceanus and Thetis. She represented the vast, encircling river that the Greeks believed flowed around the entire flat disk of the world, a source of all fresh water. Her name became a byword for the sheer bounty and generosity of the sea. When these two forces joined, the liquid essence of Nereus met the nourishing abundance of Doris. Their union produced 50 daughters, and each nymph was a perfect expression of a different aspect of their parents' domain. They were not random spirits, but a complete pantheon of the sea's character. From their father, they inherited power over the water itself, the shifting forms, the prophetic whispers of the deep. From their mother, they gained their connection to life, fertility, and the rich gifts that the sea could provide to humanity. This divine family formed a complete and beautiful system, a hierarchy of grace that brought order to the chaotic ancient seas. The first and most renowned of the 50 sisters was Thetis. Her fame would echo through the ages, not for her own immense power, but for the son she was destined to bear. Prophecy foretold that her child would become a hero greater than his own father. This was a threat that terrified the gods themselves, especially Zeus and Poseidon, who both desired her. To avoid this cosmic upheaval, they forced her into a marriage with a mortal king, Peleus. From that union was born the great warrior Achilles, whose rage in the Trojan War would become the stuff of legend. Thetis herself was a shapeshifter, a protector of sailors, and a goddess of such compassion that she once provided a new shield and armor for her son when his own were lost. Following Thetis came Psamathe, whose name means wave swift. She was the very embodiment of a rushing, oncoming wave, capable of moving with incredible speed across the sea's surface. Sailors might see her form in the crest of a swell racing toward the shore. She and her sister Amphitrite were often called upon to calm the seas and smooth the waves for a safe journey. Her swiftness used to bring quick relief from a sudden squall. Then there was Galatea, whose domain was the shoreline itself. Her name connects her to the coast, the sandy beaches and rocky shores where the sea meets the land. She was the spirit of the surf, the gentle lapping of water on the sand and the salty spray that mists the air. For a fisherman pulling his boat onto the beach or a traveler finally sighting land, Galatea represented the safety and solidity of the shore after the uncertainty of the open ocean. The fourth sister was Nereid, a nymph of the calm, sheltered harbors and the salty pools left behind by the tide. Her name evokes these serene, still water places, the safe havens where ships could anchor, protected from the wrath of the open sea. She watched over the quiet inlets and the glassy surfaces of coastal lagoons, her presence a promise of rest and security for any vessel that reached her waters. And the fifth of this group was Nereid, the nymph of the calm, honey-sweet seas. Her name is derived from the Greek word for honey, suggesting the gentle, pleasing nature of the ocean on a perfectly tranquil day. She personified those rare moments when the Mediterranean becomes as smooth as a mirror, a vast, placid expanse that offers easy and peaceful passage. To encounter Nereid's influence was to receive the sea's most benevolent gift. So these first five sisters alone present a powerful spectrum, from the world-shaking destiny of Thetis to the swift waves of Psamathe, the safe shores of Galatea, the quiet harbors of Nereid, and the honey-sweet calm of Nereid. Each one a unique and vital note in the symphony of the sea. Galatea's story offers a poignant contrast to the divine power of her sisters. She was the milk-white nymph, her name a perfect reflection of her luminous beauty, and she found her heart captured not by a god but by a young shepherd named Achilles. Their love was simple and pure, a quiet romance played out on the sunlit shores of Sicily, but their happiness drew the attention of the Cyclops Polyphemus, a monstrous son of Poseidon who was himself desperately in love with Galatea. Consumed by a jealous rage, the giant crushed the mortal Achilles beneath a massive boulder. In her infinite grief, Galatea used her divine power not for revenge but for transformation. She turned her lover's flowing blood into a clear, freshwater river that still bears his name, granting him a form of eternal life. Her tale reminds us that even among these powerful sea deities, the capacity for profound human-like love and loss was ever present. Following her is Nereus, whose name means island. She was the spirit of the coastal islands and the lush green meadows that grew upon them. Her domain was where the sea's fertility met the land, creating pockets of vibrant life. Sailors navigating treacherous coastlines would look for the signs of Nereus' influence, the green, habitable islands that offered refuge and fresh provisions. She embodied the sea's generous, life-nourishing side. Then we have Scio, whose very essence was the sea cave. Her name connects her to those hollowed-out grottos carved by the relentless waves, places of mystery and echoing sound. She was the whisper in the dark cavern, the nymph who personified the hidden, secretive spaces along the coastline where strange creatures might dwell and treasures could be hidden from the sun. The eighth sister, Tho, was the embodiment of swift, eager movement. Her name translates to the quick one, and she represented the rapid, darting speed of certain fish or the sudden, energetic rush of a current. When a school of fish moved as one in a silvery flash, that was Tho's doing. When a swift undercurrent pulled a ship along faster than expected, sailors might feel her eager hand at work. And finally in this group is Simo, a nymph whose name is a direct link to the wave itself. She was the personification of the swell, the rolling, undulating motion of the sea. While her sister Psamathe was the swift, onrushing crest of a wave, Simo was the powerful, deep water surge that gives the ocean its constant, rhythmic pulse. To feel the steady rise and fall of your ship upon the open water was to be in the presence of Simo. Together, these 5 sisters paint a richer picture of the Nereid world, one that encompasses tragic romance, fertile islands, secretive caves, and the very pulse and speed of the sea itself. Rising above all her sisters in power and status was Amphitrite, the queen of the Mediterranean itself. As the wife of the great god Poseidon, she commanded the seas not just as a nymph but as a sovereign. Her marriage to the Earth Shaker was a symbolic union that brought a measure of order to the chaotic oceans. And while Poseidon wielded the trident that stirred storms, it was often Amphitrite and her sisters who soothed the resulting fury. Her presence could placate the wildest waves, and sailors would offer prayers to her for a tranquil journey, hoping her calming influence would temper her husband's mighty power. She was the serene and majestic force that balanced the sea's untamable nature. Following her is Proto, whose name means first or earliest. She embodies the very beginnings of a sea voyage, that first crucial push away from the safety of the shore. She is the spirit of the initial journey, the moment a ship's prow first cuts into the open water, filled with promise and potential. For any explorer or merchant setting out, Proto represented that vital, hopeful start. Then we have Eucronte, whose name translates to the successful one. She was the divine patron of fortunate voyages and prosperous fishing expeditions. When a ship sailed smoothly from one port to another, encountering no storms and finding fair winds all the way, that was Eucronte's blessing at work. When nets were pulled from the water, brimming with a rich catch, fishermen knew they had found her favor. She was the embodiment of the sea's bounty, rewarding skill and courage with success. The 14th sister is Sao, a name that means safety or rescuer. She was a guardian of sailors in the most direct sense, a deliverer from the sea's peril. When a vessel was caught in a sudden squall and somehow managed to find a pocket of calm, that was Sao's intervention. When a man was thrown overboard and miraculously washed ashore, it was Sao who guided him to the sand. She did not just represent calm seas, but active salvation from the sea's dangers. This quintet of nymphs, from the queenly Amphitrite to the rescuing Sao, formed a powerful protective network. They governed the entire cycle of a sea journey, from the hopeful beginning with Proto to the successful passage with Eucronte, and finally to the ultimate deliverance with Sao, all under the watchful, calming authority of their royal sister. The sea's power extends even to the shifting sands where water meets land. Psamathe was the nymph of these sandy beaches, a goddess whose very name meant sand. Her story is one of stealth and fierce vengeance. Pursued by the mortal king Aeacus, she transformed herself into a seal to slip away into the ocean depths, a master of evasion. Yet when her own son was later killed, her grief transformed into a cold, terrible wrath. She sent a monstrous wolf to ravage the flocks of the kingdom, a stark reminder that the gentle sands could hide a core of unyielding stone. Following her is Dynamene, whose name translates to the powerful one. She embodies the raw, brute force of the sea, the immense might contained within a towering wave just before it crashes upon the shore. When a storm surge pounds the coast, that is Dynamene's domain, a display of the ocean's awesome, untamed strength. In contrast, her sister Pharusa represents the act of carrying. She was the spirit of the sea's movement, the great currents that bear ships across vast distances and the swelling waves that transport floating treasures. When a vessel is pushed steadily towards its destination by a favorable current, it is riding upon the power of Pharusa. Then we have Pontoporia, a name that means sea passage. She was the divine escort for sailors crossing from the open ocean into the safety of a harbor. Her presence guided ships through the narrow, often treacherous entrance channels, ensuring a safe and direct passage home. For any mariner seeing the mouth of their home port, a prayer to Pontoporia was a plea for that final, successful leg of the journey. And finally, there is Galene, the goddess of the calm sea. Her name gives us the word tranquility, and she personified the ocean in its most serene state, a vast, glassy stillness that brings perfect peace. After a storm, when the winds die and the waves subside into a gentle, almost imperceptible swell, that is the hand of Galen at work, offering the sea's most profound and welcome relief. From Psamathe's gritty shores to Galen's perfect calm, these five sisters show the sea's full spectrum, from its hidden ferocity to its most merciful stillness. Among these givers of maritime fortune, Doto stands as a divine patron of fishermen. Her very name means giver, a direct link to the bountiful catches she could bestow upon those who honored her. Ancient sailors knew that a shrine built for Doto on a safe shore was an investment in a full net and a prosperous return. She represented the sea's willingness to provide, turning the dangerous work of fishing into a rewarded endeavor. Following her is Nessia, a name evoking the islands, yet her role was deeply tied to the sea's vibrant life. She was a nymph of the lush marine pastures, the underwater meadows where fish would feed and multiply. Her presence ensured the seas remained fertile and teeming, the very foundation of the bounty that sailors and coastal communities depended upon for survival. Then we have Actea, whose domain was the rocky shoreline itself. She embodied the rugged coast, the very interface where the ocean's power sculpts the land. For a sailor, the sight of a familiar rocky outcrop was a sign of Actea's realm, a landmark that promised proximity to safety and the end of a long journey. Her sister, Protomedea, carries a name meaning first in counsel or first in power. She was the nymph of decisive maritime leadership, the divine insight that could guide a ship's captain to make the correct choice when paths diverged on the open water. In an era without maps, her favor was the intuition that led a vessel away from a hidden reef or toward a life-saving current. And finally, there is Doris the Younger, named for her grandmother, the bountiful Oceanid. She personified the rich, life-sustaining gifts that the sea could offer, from the precious pearls and coral harvested from its depths to the sheer abundance of its waters. She was the embodiment of the ocean's treasure chest, a reminder that the Mediterranean was not just a challenge to be crossed, but a source of immense wealth and beauty. These five sisters formed a chorus of generosity, each bestowing a different facet of the sea's great gifts upon a world that looked to the waves with both hope and reverence. Yet even the most powerful waves must eventually yield to a greater command. Psamathe was the master of this moment, her very name meaning wave stiller. She possessed the extraordinary ability to calm the ocean's fury with a single gesture, to quell a raging storm into a gentle swell. When a tempest rose without warning and ships were tossed like toys, sailors would cry out for her intervention, praying for her to lay a tranquil hand upon the chaotic waters and grant them a path to safety. Her sister, Autono, had a mind of her own. Her name translates to independent thought, and she embodied the sea's own unpredictable will. She was the sudden shift in the wind, the unexpected current that could either lead a ship astray or guide it away from danger. To navigate her waters was to understand that the sea was a thinking, feeling entity, not merely a force of nature. Then there was Lysianassa, whose name means royal deliverance. She was a savior of noble ships and their crews, a protector of those on important voyages. When a king's vessel or a hero's ship was besieged by monstrous waves, her power would create a pocket of safety around the hull, delivering them from the brink of disaster and ensuring their sacred mission could continue. Yuan, whose name connects her to the wide, open sea, was a nymph of the vast, trackless expanse. She governed the deep ocean routes, the great empty spaces between lands where a ship could sail for weeks without sight of shore. Her presence was a comfort in that immense loneliness, a reminder that even in the deepest waters, a protective eye watched over those brave enough to cross her domain. And we return to Psamathe, the sand nymph, but from a different angle. Beyond her sandy shores, she also held power over the shallows where waves break. She could soften the force of a crashing wave just before it hit the beach, preventing a vessel from being shattered upon the land. These 5 sisters formed an elite corps of wave controllers, each using their unique command over the sea's motion to guard every ship from the storm's heart to the safety of the shore. The sea's power could even take on the form of a wild, surging stallion. Hypno, whose name means horse-minded, embodies this untamed spirit, a direct link to her master Poseidon, the god who often appeared as a great horse or who created the first horse with a strike of his trident. Her domain was the charging white-capped wave, the powerful, cresting surge that gallops across the open water with a force that feels both alive and unstoppable. To see a wave break in a fury of white foam was to witness the raw, equine energy of Hypno. Her sister, Melite, shares a name with the honey-sweet nymph mentioned before, but this Melite holds a different yet equally vital role. She is the spirit of the calm, deep water bays, the serene and protected anchorages where ships could rest, safe from the horse-like waves of the open sea. She offered a gentle counterpoint to Hypno's wildness, a placid harbor after the exhilarating race across the ocean. Then we have Eulimene, whose name translates to good harbor. She was the divine guardian of the safest, most welcoming ports, the perfectly sheltered inlets where the water was always calm and the entrance was easy to navigate. For a weary sailor, the sight of a harbor under Eulimene's protection was like seeing the gates of home swing open, a promise of rest and security. Agor, whose name means illustrious or noble, represented the sea's awe-inspiring majesty. She was the spirit of the ocean's magnificent, glorious presence, the breathtaking vista of a sun setting over a calm, endless horizon, or the stunning, terrifying beauty of a storm gathering its might. Her power was in the sea's ability to command reverence, to remind all who sailed it of its divine and noble stature. Finally, there is Laomedea, a name that means leader of the people. She was a guide for entire fleets, the nymph who could shepherd a group of ships through perilous waters, ensuring they stayed together and reached their destination as one. When a king's naval expedition sailed in perfect formation, it was Laomedea's commanding presence that unified their journey. These 5 sisters together capture the sea's dual nature, from the noble, guiding leadership of Laomedea to the horse-like fury of Hypno, all balanced by the safe harbors and majestic calm that made maritime life possible. Polyno truly embodied the name of many minds, for she was the shifting, unpredictable nature of the sea itself. Her thoughts could change as quickly as the surface of the water, from calm reflection to sudden, swirling chaos. She was the reason a placid morning could transform into a squall by noon, a reminder that the ocean possessed a complex and mercurial personality all its own. Her sister Panope was a figure of immense renown, her name meaning all-seeing. She appears in Homer's Iliad, called upon by the goddess Hera to calm the sea during a critical divine mission. Panope represented the broad, panoramic view of the ocean, the vast expanse that could be surveyed and by her power settled into a universal calm. She was the great pacifier, the one whose influence could still the entire sea for a god or a hero. Then there was Cranto, whose name means the ruler or the mighty one. She personified the sea's commanding power, the sheer force that dictates the paths of ships and the rhythms of the tides. When a wave crashes with undeniable authority, that is the essence of Cranto at work, a display of the ocean's inherent sovereignty over all who dare to traverse it. Neomaris, whose name translates to of the ports, was the guardian of coastal cities and their vital harbors. She watched over the bustling docks where goods were loaded and the safe anchorages where sailors found respite. Her presence was woven into the very timbers of the wharves, a blessing on the maritime trade that connected the ancient world. And we encounter Hypno once more, the horse-minded nymph, her spirit echoing the surging, stallion-like waves that define the sea's most untamed and powerful face. Together, these 5 sisters formed a council of the ocean's many moods, from Polyno's fickle thoughts to Panope's calming gaze, from Cranto's ruling might to Nemoris's safe harbors, a complete spectrum of the sea's complex and governing will. Pontomjusa truly lived up to her name as the Sea Queen, a ruler whose authority was absolute within her domain. She commanded the open waters with a regal presence, often acting as a chief lieutenant to her sister Amphitrite in the divine court of Poseidon. Her word could quell disputes among the lesser sea gods and direct the movements of tides. Then there was Thalia, whose name means the blooming one. She personified the sea's lush fertility, the sudden and beautiful blossoming of life that could occur in a rich, upwelling current. Wherever she swam, the waters grew thick with plankton, attracting great schools of fish and making the ocean bloom with abundance. Psamathe, whose name translates to wave receiver, held a special role as a listener. She was the nymph who heard the prayers of sailors and fishermen, catching their whispered pleas on the crests of the waves and carrying them to the ears of the greater gods. A desperate prayer for a wind or a safe landing was often entrusted to her care. Iera, whose name means the Holy One, embodied the sacred and untouchable aspect of the deep sea. Her waters were a sanctuary, a place set apart from the world of men, where the divine could exist in pure, undisturbed peace. To violate her realm was to invite the wrath of the gods themselves. And we meet you, Cronte, once more, the successful one, but here her governance is over the final, triumphant moment of a voyage. She was the spirit who guided a ship's final approach, ensuring its successful entry into port and the prosperous conclusion of its mission. These 5 rulers managed everything from the sea's sacred heart to its most fruitful moments, ensuring that the great blue kingdom functioned as a perfectly ordered, living realm. These final 5 sisters complete the great chorus of the sea. Glauce, whose name means sea green or silvery gray, was the very glitter of the ocean under a bright sun. She was that sudden, blinding flash of light reflected off a rolling wave, a dazzling reminder of the sea's hidden treasures and its luminous beauty. Her presence turned the water's surface into a shifting mosaic of light and shadow. Next is Pontoporia, whose name translates to sea passage. She was a guardian of the narrow straits and channels, the specific points where a ship must pass from one body of water to another. Her role was to guide vessels safely through these perilous, constricted waterways, ensuring they did not fall victim to hidden rocks or conflicting currents at these critical junctures. Then we have Ligor, whose name means gathering of the people or assembly. She was the spirit of the bustling crowds found in prosperous port towns. Her domain was not the open water, but the lively harbors where sailors, merchants, and fishermen gathered, their voices mingling into a single, vibrant hum of human activity fueled by the sea's bounty. The 49th sister is Uagor, the name meaning good assembly or eloquent one. She embodied the successful outcome of those gatherings, the favorable agreement struck between ship captains and merchants, the good news announced in the harbor, and the eloquent prayers of thanks given for a safe return. She was the voice of prosperity and successful communication born from the sea, and the final Nereid, completing the circle of 50, is Laomedea. Her name, leader of the people, cast her as a guide for entire fleets and coastal communities. She was the unifying force that brought ships together in a common purpose, ensuring that a community's maritime endeavors were coordinated and successful, a fitting final note to this symphony of oceanic influence. These last 5, from Glauce's glittering light to Laomedea's guiding leadership, may be lesser known in the myths, but their roles were just as vital, connecting the sea's raw power directly to the human world it sustained. The Great Trojan War was not merely a conflict of heroes and kings, it was a drama written upon the waves. Thetis, the most faithful of the Nereids, was inextricably bound to its tragic core. The prophecy that her son would outshine his father was a burden she carried into motherhood, and her first act was one of desperate divine protection. She took the infant Achilles to the river Styx, the mythical boundary of the underworld, whose waters could grant invulnerability. Dipping him into the sacred current, she held him firmly by the heel, leaving that single spot untouched by the magical flow. This one small point, the famous Achilles' heel, would become the fulcrum upon which the entire war would eventually turn, a testament to a mother's love and its unintended, world-altering consequences. When Achilles, now a grown and peerless warrior, withdrew from the fighting in a rage, the tide of the war shifted catastrophically for the Greeks. His dearest friend, Patroclus, was slain while wearing Achilles' own armor. Consumed by a grief that mirrored the sea's deepest tempest, Thetis heard her sons lament. She rose from her silver cave and ascended to Olympus itself, not to plead with Zeus, but to seek the forge of the smith god Hephaestus. There she commissioned a new set of armor, a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship unlike any seen on Earth. The shield alone was a work of art depicting the entire world in intricate metals, a microcosm of the peace and civilization that the war was tearing apart. This was not just equipment, it was a mother's final powerful gift, enabling her son's glorious yet doomed return to battle. And when Achilles finally fell, struck by an arrow in that one vulnerable spot, the sea itself seemed to weep. Thetis and her 50 sisters emerged from the depths, their luminous forms gathering along the shore. They raised a collective, haunting lament, a chorus of immortal grief for a mortal son. Their voices blended with the sound of the surf, a divine dirge for the fallen hero, proving that even for the eternal nymphs, the pain of loss was a tide that knew no bounds. But the Nereids' compassion was not reserved for Thetis alone, nor was their power limited to lamentation. When the hero Jason set sail with his Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece, the 50 sisters became his unseen escort across the perilous Mediterranean. Their journey was a gauntlet of nautical nightmares, and the most formidable challenge awaited them at the Symplegades, the clashing rocks. These were not mere stones, but living, sentient jaws of stone that would fly together with the force of a titan's clap, crushing any vessel that dared to pass between them. As the Argo approached, the sound was deafening, a thunderous grinding that echoed across the waves. The rocks sensed the ship and began their violent dance, rushing toward each other with the sole purpose of turning the great vessel into splinters. It was then that the Nereids intervened. Working in unison, they swam beneath the churning surface, their collective will exerted upon the very currents. They guided the Argo with an invisible hand, pushing it forward on a perfectly timed surge of water, a wave born of divine intention. The ship shot through the narrow channel, its stern ornament clipped by the crashing rocks as they slammed together a moment too late. The Argo was through, and the Symplegades, bested by the skill of the heroes and the grace of the Sea Nymphs, were forever stilled, their magic broken. This was not a random act of nature, but a deliberate rescue, a sign that the Nereids favored those whose quests were just and whose hearts were brave. Their assistance extended beyond singular obstacles. During long, starless nights when storms would rise from nowhere, the Argonauts might hear a strange, melodic hum mingling with the wind. It was the sound of the Nereid song, a chorus not of luring destruction like the sirens, but of gentle pacification. Their voices would weave through the gale, and the frantic waves would gradually lower their crests, the howling winds softening to a whisper. The sea would grow calm around the ship, allowing the exhausted crew to rest and regain their bearings. For Jason and his men, these moments of sudden peace were a mystery, a gift from the gods they could not see. They did not know the 50 sisters were there, guiding them, testing them, and ultimately ensuring that the hero's vessel remained on its fated course, proving that the Nereids were the silent, steadfast guardians of epic destiny itself. Their timeless grace was captured not just in song, but in clay and stone. Across the ancient world, from the workshops of Athens to the villas of Rome, artists sought to immortalize the 50 sea nymphs, turning vases, friezes, and mosaic floors into windows to their shimmering world. A common and delightful motif shows them riding across the waves on the backs of dolphins, their robes flowing behind them as if made of sea foam itself. These creatures were not mere transportation but joyful companions, symbolizing the harmony between the nymphs and all the intelligent life of the sea. Other depictions show them astride hippocampi, the mythical sea horses with the foreparts of a stallion and the curling tails of a fish, creatures of pure poetic power that perfectly bridged the wild energy of the ocean and the noble bearing of its divine court. One of the most poignant scenes in all of Greek art is the delivery of Achilles' armor. We see Thetis, her face often etched with a mother's sorrow, emerging from the water with her sister Nereids. They hold the magnificent shield and spear forged by Hephaestus, presenting the divine arms to their grieving son. This moment, frozen on the surface of a wine jug or a storage vessel, was a powerful reminder of the nymphs' direct involvement in human fate, their compassion literally arming a hero for his destiny. Another popular subject for grand sculptures and intricate vase paintings was the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. This was a monumental event, the gathering of the entire divine pantheon, but the Nereids always held a central place. Artists portrayed them arriving in a magnificent procession from the sea, bringing gifts and celebrating their sisters' union, even as they knew the tragic prophecy that hung over the marriage. In these images, they are the epitome of oceanic grace, their dance a fluid, eternal celebration. These artistic renderings were far more than simple decoration. For the people who used these pots daily or walked upon these mosaics, they were a constant, tangible connection to the divine forces that governed their world. Every time a person drew water from a jar adorned with a Nereid, they were reminded of the fresh, life-giving gift of the sea. Every mosaic of a nymph on a dolphin in a wealthy Roman's home was a statement of belief, a hope for safe passage, and the favor of the 50 sisters who ruled the waves. Art made their power visible, transforming the mysterious depths of the Mediterranean into a familiar, beautifully ordered kingdom. Their dominion over the sea was a gentle one, expressed through a profound kinship with every creature that swam in its depths. The Nereids did not merely command the waves, they lived in perfect harmony with the dolphins, seals, and glittering schools of fish, their very presence a blessing upon the Mediterranean's vibrant ecosystems. Dolphins were their most cherished companions, often depicted as the noble steeds that carried the nymphs on their joyful rides across the sun-dappled surface. This was no mere artistic fancy, it was a symbol of mutual trust and intelligence, a reflection of the ancient understanding that these creatures were the sea's most playful and benevolent spirits. When a pod of dolphins would race alongside a ship, leaping alongside the prow, sailors saw it as a direct sign of the Nereid's favor, a promise of clear passage and good fortune. It was as if the nymphs themselves were guiding the vessel, using the dolphins as their swift and graceful messengers. This connection extended to the more mysterious depths, embodied by the seals who are often considered sacred to the Nereids. The nymph Psamathe, the goddess of the sandy shore, famously transformed herself into a seal to escape an unwanted pursuer, slipping into the ocean with a fluid grace that highlighted her intimate bond with these intelligent animals. Seals, which could move between the land and the sea with such ease, became living symbols of the Nereid's own domain, the liminal space where the water meets the shore. To see a seal watching from a rocky outcrop was to feel the gaze of the nymphs themselves, a silent guardian observing all who entered their realm. Even the vast, shimmering schools of fish were seen as part of their divine retinue. The swift, darting movements of 1,000 sardines moving as one silver entity were directed by the will of nymphs like Tho, the eager one, who gave the sea its sudden, energetic bursts of life. The fertility of these underwater pastures, the lush meadows that fed the entire marine world, was the domain of sisters like Nereus, ensuring the oceans remained eternally abundant. The Nereids were not distant rulers, but the very life force of the sea, their essence woven into the dance of every creature, from the smallest fish to the most powerful dolphin, creating a living, breathing kingdom beneath the waves. Their voices were a powerful antidote to the ocean's rage, when a storm descended, turning the sea into a churning chaos of black water and shrieking wind, ancient sailors knew their survival might depend on the favor of the Nereids. These 50 sisters did not create the tempests that was the domain of their uncle Poseidon or the wrath of other gods. Instead, they held the unique power to soothe the fury he unleashed. A desperate captain would lean into the gale, his prayers carried away by the storm, but he would call upon the Nereids by name, asking for Galen to grant tranquility, for Psamathe to still the waves, for Sao to deliver them from the abyss. It was believed that if their hearts were pure and their offerings sincere, the nymphs would hear. They would rise from their silver cave and swim into the heart of the maelstrom, their serene presence acting as a balm upon the water. Their collective song, a melody older than the gods themselves, would weave through the howling winds, and slowly, the towering waves would begin to lower their crests, the frantic water growing calm as if a divine hand were smoothing a rumpled cloth. This was not magic in the common sense, but a fundamental recalibration of the sea's own spirit, a return to its natural order orchestrated by its most devoted guardians. We see this divine intervention most famously in the epic wanderings of Odysseus. After escaping the monstrous Cyclops, his fleet was punished by Poseidon with a hurricane of unparalleled violence. The sky fell into the sea and his ships were smashed to splinters, as Odysseus himself clung to the wreckage of his vessel, straddling 2 planks in a desperate bid for life. His thoughts turned not only to the gods of Olympus but to the benevolent spirits of the deep. While Homer does not name them directly, the subsequent calming of the waves that allowed him to finally reach the shore of an unknown island bears all the hallmarks of the Nereids' compassion. It was as if their father, the wise Nereus, had observed the hero's suffering and commanded his daughters to intervene, to carve a path of safety through the divine wrath of his brother. In this context, the Nereids acted as essential mediators, the gentle counterbalance to the overwhelming and often reckless power of the greater gods. They were the sea's conscience, the force that ensured justice and mercy could still be found even in the face of a deity's personal vengeance. This relationship between father and daughters was central to their storm-calming power. Nereus, the old man of the sea, possessed perfect foresight. He could see the storm before its clouds even formed and knew the fate of every soul upon the waves. When he witnessed a storm that was unjust or overly cruel, or when he deemed a sailor or hero worthy of salvation, he would issue a quiet command from the depths. His 50 daughters were his hands and voice in the water, the executors of his benevolent will. They moved with a unity of purpose that was itself a force of nature. One nymph might work to subdue a particular rogue wave, while another smoothed the surface ahead of a floundering ship, and a third guided a favorable current beneath its hull. It was a coordinated, divine effort, a symphony of salvation playing out beneath the chaos. For the sailors caught in the storm, the experience was transformative. The sudden lull, the appearance of a patch of clear sky, the gentle rocking that replaced the violent pitching, these were not just lucky breaks. They were miracles, tangible evidence that the sea was not a mindless enemy, but a realm watched over by 50 compassionate sisters who could and would choose to save them. When Rome began to absorb the rich tapestry of Greek culture, the Nereids sailed effortlessly into their new pantheon. The Romans, ever practical, adopted these sea nymphs almost wholesale, calling them the Nereids and folding them into their own worldview. Yet, as with so many borrowed deities, subtle but significant shifts occurred in their character and the stories told about them. The Roman sea was a different realm, and its nymphs reflected a more disciplined, ordered empire. Roman authors like Ovid became the new storytellers for these ancient spirits. In his monumental work, The Metamorphoses, Ovid did not merely translate Greek myths, he reinvented them for a Roman audience, giving the Nereids roles that often emphasized transformation, fate, and the intricate relationship between gods and mortals. Where a Greek poet might highlight the nymphs' collective power to calm a storm, Ovid was drawn to their personal tragedies and their role in the grand, often cruel, cycles of change that defined his work. His retelling of the tale of Galatea and Achilles is a prime example, infusing the story with a deeper pathos and a sharper focus on the violent passion of the Cyclops Polyphemus, making the story less about the sea's nature and more about the raw, uncontrollable emotions of love and jealousy. This reframing shifted the Nereids from being purely elemental forces to becoming key players in the human and divine dramas of love, loss, and revenge. Their integration into Roman state religion was also telling. While the Greeks honored them for safe passage and bounty, the Romans, a people who built an empire on maritime trade and naval power, saw them as vital protectors of their fleets and commercial lanes. A Roman general embarking on a naval campaign might make an offering not just to Neptune, the Roman Poseidon, but to the Nereids as well, seeking their favor to ensure the safe transport of his legions. Their images adorned Roman villas not just as beautiful decorations, but as symbols of the prosperity that the controlled Mediterranean brought to the empire. In this way, the Nereids became emblematic of the Pax Romana at sea, their calming influence a divine parallel to the Roman imposition of order upon the chaotic waters. The most profound change, however, was in their relationship with the central sea deity. The Greek Poseidon was a god of untamable primal force, and his wife Amphitrite was a powerful, independent queen who could soothe his rages. The Roman Neptune, by contrast, was more sanitized, a stately god of the sea who was first and foremost a symbol of Roman naval dominance. In this context, the Nereids often lost a measure of their individual agency, becoming a more homogeneous group of attendants in Neptune's court. Their power was still acknowledged, but it was now frequently channeled through the authority of the Roman state and its primary sea god. They were less the 50 distinct voices of the sea and more a unified chorus celebrating the glory of Rome's maritime destiny. This subtle transformation shows how a culture can take another's gods and reshape them, preserving their forms but altering their souls to fit a new world order. Far from the grand myths of Homer, the true devotion to the Nereids was carved into the coastlines of the ancient world. In small fishing villages and bustling port towns, from the shores of Greece to the islands of Asia Minor, these sea nymphs were not just characters in a story, they were immediate, accessible goddesses. Local cults sprang up, each community often choosing one particular sister to champion, a divine patron who understood their specific stretch of water and its unique dangers. The evidence of this heartfelt worship lies buried in the sand and stone, waiting for a trowel to reveal it. Imagine a fisherman from the island of Aegina, his small boat nearly capsized in a squall. He cries out to the nymph Melite, the spirit of calm seas, and by some miracle the waves subside. In gratitude, he does not build a grand temple. Instead, he commissions a small terracotta statue of a woman riding a dolphin, a simple votive offering. He brings it to a modest shrine by the water's edge, placing it among dozens of similar figures, each one a silent story of a prayer answered, a life saved. These are the finds that archaeologists uncover, these humble terracotta plaques and tiny lead sailors left in coastal caves, personal tokens of thanks that speak louder than any epic poem. Inscriptions on stone altars tell the same tale. A weathered block found near Pylos bears a dedication to the Nereid Doto, the giver. It was paid for by the local fishermen's guild, a collective thank you for a season of abundant catches. Another, from a cove in southern Turkey, is dedicated to Psamathe, the wave swift, likely by merchants whose ships relied on swift, favorable currents to make their deliveries on time. These were not offerings to a distant, abstract power, but a business relationship with a familiar neighbor, a goddess you could name, whose favor you could earn with a gift and whose wrath you feared if you neglected her. This local, personal worship reveals a fundamental truth about the ancient Mediterranean mind. The sea was not a single, monolithic entity, but a collection of countless individual moods and places. A sailor navigating the treacherous currents off Cape Saunion needed a different protector than a sponge diver in the calm bays of Kos. By venerating specific Nereids, people were acknowledging this intricate reality. They were mapping the divine onto their own lived experience, turning the vast, impersonal power of the ocean into 50 friendly faces, each one a specialist who could be called upon in a moment of very specific need. Their 50 voices did not fade with the marble of antiquity, but found new currents in the heart of modern storytelling. The Nereids swim through our collective imagination, their essence distilled into the mermaids and water spirits that populate our books and screens. In Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, the ancient gods and monsters are reborn for a new generation, and the sea nymphs are very much present. They appear not as distant figures, but as active participants in the adventures, their grace and power intact, reminding young readers that the old Mediterranean is still alive with magic just beneath the surface. This is not a simple retelling, it is a reinvigoration, proving that these archetypes of the sea remain powerfully relevant. Video games have become a new kind of silver cave for these ancient spirits. In titles like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, players can literally dive into the vibrant waters of the Aegean, encountering a world that feels touched by the Nereids' presence, even if they are not named directly. The clarity of the water, the schools of darting fish, the sunken ruins that hint at lost treasures, all evoke the beautiful, ordered realm they were said to govern. In other fantasy role-playing games, water nymphs and Nereids are common enemy types or benevolent quest-givers, directly channeling the ancient idea of the sea as a sentient, personality-driven realm. These digital oceans are the modern equivalent of the ancient Greeks' lived experience, a place where the natural and the supernatural seamlessly blend. Their influence flows most strongly into our enduring fascination with mermaids. While the mermaid of Northern European folklore is often a more solitary and sometimes ominous figure, the classical Nereid provides a template for a kinder, more communal sea spirit. The depiction of mermaids in films, from animated classics to big-budget adventures, often borrows the Nereids' affinity for dolphins, their playful nature, and their role as guardians of marine life. They are the inheritors of that ancient role, the beautiful, powerful women of the sea who are deeply connected to its well-being. Modern fantasy literature is filled with courts of water fae and oceanic elves, whose societies and magic are deeply indebted to the model of the 50 Sisters, a shimmering court beneath the waves with their own hierarchies and ancient laws. Even the names of the sisters have not been forgotten. Scientific discovery often looks to myth for inspiration, and the Nereids have lent their name to a fascinating class of marine worms, the Nereid polychaetes. These bristleworms are known for their segmented, graceful bodies and their importance in coastal ecosystems, a fitting, if humble, tribute to the nymphs who embodied the sea's fertile, life-giving energy. From the pages of a children's book to the code of a video game, and even to the classification of a sea creature, the legacy of the Nereids endures. They are a testament to the power of these ancient stories to adapt and thrive, ensuring that the 50 Sisters of the Mediterranean continue to guide our imagination, just as they once guided sailors to safe harbor. Yet the sea holds many voices, and not all of them offer safe passage. The haunting call of the sirens presents a stark contrast to the benevolent chorus of the Nereids, a dangerous melody that has often led to the two being confused throughout history. Where the Nereids were 50 distinct sisters, each governing a specific aspect of the sea's bounty and behavior, the sirens were a smaller, more ominous group. Their number is often given as 2 or 3, and they were not graceful nymphs of the waves, but creatures born from a river god and a muse, often depicted as part woman and part bird. Their domain was not the open ocean, but a specific, deadly stretch of rocky coastline. Their power was singular and terrifying, a song of such divine beauty that any sailor who heard it would be compelled to steer his ship onto the sharp rocks, lured to a certain and watery grave. The Nereids used their voices to calm storms and guide ships, their song a lullaby for the sea itself. The sirens used their voices to create a different kind of storm, one of obsessive desire and self-destruction within the sailor's own mind. This fundamental difference in intent is the clearest line between them. One group were protectors and guides, the very spirit of the sea's nurturing grace. The other were predators, the embodiment of the ocean's cruel, deceptive temptations. So why are they so often mixed up? The confusion likely stems from their shared connection to the sea and their use of enchanting song. Both are beautiful, feminine figures whose voices carry supernatural power over mortals. In later artistic traditions, especially during the Renaissance, the classical distinction blurred. Artists began to depict sirens with fish tails instead of bird features, merging their lethal allure with the more familiar form of a mermaid, a form that rightly belongs to the Nereids. This artistic shorthand folded the dangerous siren into the image of the beautiful sea maiden, erasing the crucial moral divide between a guardian and a killer. The story of Odysseus perfectly illustrates this dichotomy. He was warned about the sirens by the sorceress Circe, who told him their meadow was piled high with the rotting bodies of men. To survive, Odysseus had his crew plug their ears with beeswax and lashed himself to the mast, desperate to hear the fatal song without being able to act on it. His encounter was a battle of wills, a test of resistance against a force that wanted him dead. Contrast this with the unseen aid of the Nereids, who likely calmed the waves for him at other times, their presence a silent helping hand, not a sung snare. One group offered a test you had to resist, the other offered aid you desperately prayed for. Recognizing this distinction restores the true nature of the Nereids. They were not seductresses of the deep, but its steadfast stewards, their 50 songs a symphony of safety in a vast and unpredictable realm. The number 50 was no random count for these sea nymphs, but a symbol of perfect completeness in the Greek imagination. This figure represented a full set, a complete and harmonious whole, much like the 50 months of the ancient Greek festival cycle or the 50 oarsmen often said to power a heroic ship. It was a number that conveyed totality, suggesting that the Nereids together embodied every possible facet of the Mediterranean's character. There was not a single mood of the sea, from the gentlest ripple to the most terrifying storm surge, that did not fall under the domain of one of these 50 sisters. Their collective presence meant the ocean was not a chaotic void, but a fully staffed and beautifully ordered kingdom, with a specialized deity for every need a sailor might have. This symbolic completeness finds a powerful echo in the legend of the Argonauts. The heroic crew of the Argo, sailing to retrieve the Golden Fleece, was also said to number 50. This was not a coincidence. The 50 heroes navigating the sea and the 50 nymphs governing it created a perfect mirroring symmetry. The Argonauts represented humanity's brave attempt to master the maritime world, while the Nereids represented that world's divine, intelligent response. Each hero on that journey could be seen as under the watchful eye of a corresponding nymph, their fates intertwined on the vast, open water. What does this symbolic number tell us about the ancient Greek view of the natural world? It reveals a profound desire to find order and benevolent purpose in nature's immense power. The sea was not an enemy to be conquered, but a complex, living system to be understood and respected. The 50 Nereids were the personification of that understanding. They transformed the overwhelming, often frightening vastness of the ocean into a manageable concept, breaking it down into 50 distinct, approachable forms of grace. From the safe harbor guarded by Eulimene to the life-giving fertility of Thalia, every nurturing aspect of the sea had a name, a face, and a story. This symbolic system offered comfort, assuring those who ventured onto the waves that they were not at the mercy of a mindless force, but were guests in a realm watched over by 50 compassionate rulers. To understand the Nereids fully, we must see them within the wider, bustling court of the sea. Their family ties connected them to every corner of the marine world, creating a divine network of immense complexity and power. Their most numerous cousins were the Oceanids, the 3,000 daughters of the Titans Oceanus and Thetis, while the Nereids were the spirits of the Mediterranean's specific coastal waters. The Oceanids governed the fresh water that encircled the entire world, from rivers and streams to clouds and rain. Their mother, Doris, was one of these Oceanids, making the Nereids a bridge between the briny, navigable sea and the life-giving fresh waters that fed the land. This lineage meant the sea was not an isolated realm, but intimately connected to every river a sailor had ever known and every storm cloud that gathered on the horizon. Then there was Triton, the mighty son of Poseidon and Amphitrite. As the queen's son, he was the herald and lieutenant of the sea gods, often depicted with a conch shell trumpet that he would blow to calm or raise the waves. The Nereids, as Amphitrite's sisters and attendants, were his aunts and his closest allies. They formed his retinue, swimming alongside him in processions and working in concert with his commands. When Triton blew his horn to settle a storm, it was the Nereids who carried out the order, their hands smoothing the turbulent waters into a gentle swell. This collaborative relationship shows the sea's hierarchy in action, a family business where each member had a distinct role. Their dealings with sea monsters further defined their benevolent nature. The Mediterranean was a place of terrors like Scylla, the six-headed horror lurking in a narrow strait, and Charybdis, the massive, ship-swallowing whirlpool. These monstrous forces were often born from the wrath of other gods, and they represented the sea's untamable, chaotic side. The Nereids stood in direct opposition to these perils. They were the guides who helped sailors navigate away from Scylla's cliff, the calming influence that could lessen the pull of Charybdis. They did not command the monsters, but they worked tirelessly to mitigate the damage they caused, acting as the balancing force of order against the sea's inherent chaos. Even the lesser sea gods, like the fish-tailed ichthyocentaurs or the wise old sea prophets like Proteus, fell within their sphere of influence. The Nereids were the constant, graceful presence that linked them all, from the deepest trench to the sunlit shore. They were the cohesive element in a vast and often contradictory pantheon, the 50 sisters who made the unpredictable ocean feel like a kingdom with laws, a family, and a heart. So the 50 sisters of the Mediterranean remain, a timeless chorus of wave and shore. They were never just one thing, but a complete pantheon of the sea's many faces, from the world-shaking destiny of Thetis to the safe harbors of Eulimene, the swift currents of Tho, and the sandy shores of Psamathe. Each nymph held a unique piece of the ocean's vast puzzle, a specialized role that made the immense, chaotic power of the sea feel intimate and manageable. They were the protectors who calmed storms for sailors, the nurturers who filled fishermen's nets, and the compassionate spirits who mourned a fallen hero. Their stories, woven from love, loss, and quiet duty, remind us that the ancient world saw divinity not in distant, untouchable figures, but in the very forces that shaped daily life. The legacy of the Nereids flows far beyond their silver cave, into our art, our stories, and even our language, a testament to their enduring hold on our imagination. Which of these 50 captivating sea nymphs resonates most with you? Was it the tragic love of Galatea, the queenly power of Amphitrite, or the swift salvation offered by Sao? Share your favorite stories or questions about these mythical guardians of the deep in the comments.